Welcome to the Accountability Podcast, where we'll be talking about burning boxes and breaking chains. Those boxes that are limiting your beliefs on what you can do, and those chains that may be holding you back from things that you really want to accomplish. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first ever It's My Fault podcast on accountability. This came into being a few months back when my friend here, Justin Jones Fosu, and I were having a conversation about me wanting to start a podcast. And the one thing that I do know about is accountability and it being my fault. So that's one thing that's helped me many years ago make altering changes in my life by taking accountability and realizing it didn't matter if it was a conversation, a relationship, a job. It all boiled down to me holding myself accountable for what was going on in my life. And that made all the difference in the world. So I want to welcome my first ever guest, my friend, Justin Jones Fosu.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And it is your fault that we started this podcast.
So you said in our previous reel where we're announcing, I'm going to be dropping that tonight online to announce this podcast. So the main thing that I want the viewers and listeners to understand, this is a conversation between people that I know and myself on how we not only hold ourselves accountable, but how accountability has changed us. And changed our trajectory in life. So one of the things, my first question for you, Justin, is can you name a specific time in your life where you realized it's my fault and it changed everything?
Man, how long do we have to go for?
Oh, dude.
Man, I
Boatloads.
learned it's my fault quite a bit in my journey. And I mean, I can speak to several instances. I'll speak to one that really kind of still resonates, especially with some of the work that we currently do around respectful disagreement. Is I had a long-term team member that was with us for 7 years, and that shared that she was going to transition out of the company. And I believe in real, authentic, honest exit interviews. For some people, exit interviews are just a rubber stamp because they want to make sure that they're legally covered. But one of our values for our company is +1. It's like, what is one thing that we can do to continue to improve? And so I treated it that way. I was like, hey, like, you're on your way out. I'd love to get your honest feedback. You've already been paid. You already have all the stuff that you need. Like, share honestly, like, what we can learn or what would have been different, or even what would have caused you to stay. And she shared some several things, but one thing that really stood out to me was that she didn't feel at times comfortable to disagree with me. And that hit me hard, especially because I wrote a book called what?
I respectfully disagree.
I respectfully disagree, right? And
you
we
encourage people to disagree with you. So that is shocking, man. I mean, wow.
Yes. So and not only encourage, we teach people, we teach leaders how to create cultures of respectful disagreement, like all these things. And so it really was a gut punch for me. I was like, wait a minute, like, what in the world? You didn't feel like, I was like, I know I've said this. And here's where I had two options. Option one, I could have completely dismissed what she said, right? And like, I've said this before. I've said that you can disagree with me. I've done, and I could have gone that direction, which I didn't, thankfully. Option two is I chose to take accountability and take it seriously. Right? One of the things my therapist has said, he gave me this framework, not framework, but thought process, is that there's a difference between taking all responsibility and full responsibility. And full responsibility is taking ownership of what you brought to it. Right. Mm-hmm. And because oftentimes it's so easy for us, if it wasn't, all of our responsibility, we dismiss it because like, oh, the 5% that they contributed, that's the real reason why. No, versus what I decided to do is saying, well, okay, Justin, well, what did you do? What did you not do? What could you have done differently? And I realized, even though I said it up front, that I needed to say it over and over and over again. I needed to
Was it
say that you can disagree with me.
was it something in your action or your behavior that thought that that was not an option for her?
Yeah, so again, this is all with the communication. So people who know me know I'm a very passionate person, right? So when I
Yep.
believe something, I speak very passionately. It doesn't mean that I don't want to hear other views or that I don't hear other perspectives, and that's where personality differences matter, right? But because
Mhm.
I'm very passionate, I need to be very mindful that in my passion, it can seem as very aggressive to people, right? It's
Yeah.
if I'm making my point, right? It's because I'm believing my point. But what that doesn't mean is that you can't believe in your point. But that can come across to some as
Mhm.
that, well, I'm just gonna hunker down because you're very being very passionate about it. And for some people, passion is aggression. And so for me, what that made me realize, not that I shouldn't be passionate, because that's who I am, is
Right.
that I need to be able to preempt those moments of sharing. It's just saying, hey, I really do want your feedback. I want you to share passionately how you share, but I'm also going to share why I believe this is true. And so it also led to me to a lack of action. This is one of the things that we started also helping other leaders to be able to do. Is just because you say it once doesn't
Right.
mean that it's now changed as for the culture. And give you a great example, and I'd love to get your perspective, Jeff. Is I can tell you everyone, and I use this example, you should sit up straight, right? And normally what ends up happening in my presentations that people sit up straight for a moment, and then 60 seconds later, they go back to what's comfortable,
Mhm.
slouching or shoulders forward. And it's not because they don't want to do it. It's not because they didn't hear you say it. It's because it hasn't become a habit, a part of culture, and it hasn't been reinforced. And that's what I realized. Even though I said it once, where it's all my fault is I didn't reinforce it in ways that it was built in and baked into the culture.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I totally understand that because I do the same thing. When you were saying that about slouching, it's like, yeah, people say sit up straighter, and sometimes I'll think about it and I'll sit up straight. Then a few minutes later, I'm like, leaning back down or sliding back down, because it is a comfort level. And there's so many things in our life though that we do that without even realizing it. We just slip back into the comfortable, or the complacent portion of
Yeah.
wherever we may be. But back to your when you said that about the accountability in the office and being feeling, some people feel threatened because of your passion. That's where I have found helping people with disc profiles and get them to understand. So that Johnny receives better in this regard rather than just point blank telling him. And be like, you get a D personality or a more C personality. If you need a spreadsheet filled out, give it to that person. Don't give it to me. I'm so high of an I, it's like this on my chart. So I'm not the guy for spreadsheets.
Yeah.
So being able to understand that in a culture, in a company, is huge. And if you can
Yeah.
get them where they're open minded enough and get everybody in a room, which I'm going to be doing this week, working with a company in Houston, it's a group setting where everybody is just amazed at what they're finding out about themselves and how they do
Mhm.
business, and they want to work together more cohesively. So that's something that could be very beneficial in some companies, especially when the leader is a strong person like yourself,
Yeah.
understanding where everybody's at. But then the intentionality of it, where you have to be intentional on how you deal with each one.
Yeah.
There's the overarching theme of the company's progression and where the company's going, but being able to deal with everybody individually can just help tremendously in the process.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you. How could someone begin to recognize their part in a disagreement
Yeah.
without pointing fingers?
I think the first thing is actually not what most people think, right? And it actually led into some of our kind of unofficial research. In 2024, we looked at close to about 101 articles on civil conversations, respectful disagreement, all that kind of stuff. And we noticed that 0%, let me repeat that, 0% actually dealt with the thing I'm going to cover. And
Wow.
that one thing is what do you do before disagreements occur in the first place? And most of the civil conversations, the conflict resolutions, all these kind of things deal with when you're in it, what's going on, how do you deal with it afterwards. I mean, very few things deal with afterwards. But here's I'll give you two things. So here's the first thing. One is I encourage people to exercise those muscles ahead of time and to intentionally engage in understandings, conversations with people who you disagree with, and
Mhm.
go asking two questions. What did I learn about this event, experiences, and our people? And what did I learn about myself as I experienced them? We call that the Circles of Grace Challenge. And the reason that that's important is because if you don't exercise those muscles ahead of time, that you're always going to be in reactionary mode. And it's going to be
True.
like, how do I respond versus you don't know how to respond because you constantly are around people who agree with you, think like you, believe like you, and so forth. And so that's the first thing is I encourage people to preempt disagreements because the more and more that you've been in those situations, the better you're able to handle conversations where disagreements occur. The second piece of if you find yourself in the disagreement, one of the things I want you to ask yourself in your brain, you don't have to say it out loud because it may be very weird. Weird is good, by the way.
It is good. It is good.
But
That's why we get
asking,
along.
yes, absolutely, is what if they're right?
Sometimes people don't want to answer that question to themselves. It sounds a lot like what I tell people when you go into a conversation with someone that may be on the other side of that fence from you in your thinking process is have a conversation, not a confrontation.
Yeah,
And the first words that come out of your mouth is going to determine which way that goes.
yeah.
So that's where it comes back into it's my fault. If it goes south, it's your fault
Mm,
because you may have gone into it blaming or pointing fingers instead of just saying, hey, help me understand your perspective. I want to learn more. Help me understand your side of this equation because right now, from where I'm sitting, I don't understand.
mm,
That goes into a conversation instead of what in the world were you thinking?
yeah,
Confrontation. It's absolutely true. And it's amazing to me that we're getting further and further away from having conversations, Justin.
mm,
The whole world is. It's even when you go to the store, I see families, spouses. They're having confrontations with each other in the middle of Costco, for goodness sake.
yeah.
The way they talk to each other. I'm like, you really wanted his cooperation now when you said that to him?
Right.
I just, I'm amazed. So I think
Yeah.
it's one of the reasons why you mentioned, I think, the authenticity. I think it's one of the reasons why you and I clicked when we first met 2 years ago was we both brought authenticity, and we were being real, who we
Yeah.
are. And so it clicked and I appreciate the friendship. So back to that conversation though about the employees and stuff. What steps have you taken to make sure that it doesn't happen with any of your future employees or even your current ones?
Yeah. So the first thing that I did is, I apologized to the exiting employee, right? And sincere
Good call.
apology. I didn't say, you know what, I'm sorry that you felt that way, right? Right? Like, which is a
They
fake
always
apology.
say that.
It's not accepting, responsibility. Um, I said, hey, I'm sorry that I made you feel that way, right? Because again, it's whether it's intention or impact, the impact was still there, even though that was not the intention. And so for me, realizing that, when we're not in ego, allows us to operate from a place of even if it wasn't intended, I can still apologize for the way I made you feel and
Absolutely.
navigate it differently. The second thing that is I addressed with the team and I shared with the team openly and honestly. I didn't try to hide it or kind of bury it, and just like because it was just a conversation I had with her, and I shared this is what she brought forward, and I apologize to them if I've ever made them feel that way, and I shared what I learned, and I re-emphasized that I absolutely even in my passion I want you all to disagree with me because I believe that the only way that we get to better solutions is through helpful disagreement. It's the respectful
Absolutely.
disagreement. And
Absolutely.
it's like that's where innovation comes from, right? And
Mhm.
so I've committed to them. I will do a better job of when I'm asking for suggestions or thoughts to one, either get yours first, and or two, if I have shared mine, to be very intentional of sharing that I want your perspective. And by the way, if I notice you never disagree with me, that's gonna be the thing that hurts you in our
That's
company,
correct. Yeah.
not if you do disagree with me. Because if you don't disagree with me, that just means that we're not growing, we're not being innovative, and that I have yes people around me, and I don't, and that's not what I want, and I don't hire people to be
No.
yes people, and so that is something I had to be mindful of.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had a guy that I reported to one time. He was one of my best friends for numerous years before I went to work for him. And his oldest daughter, the first question out of her mouth is, "How in the world you let that happen?" That I'm now reporting to him. But I would call him on stuff in meetings. I'm like, "Have you lost your mind?"
Yeah,
We're still friends, but the other employees would look like, What'd you say? He's the boss." I'm like, "It doesn't matter."
right.
But he and I have that open discord that we can do back and forth with each other, and we still do to this day. And it's been almost 40 years we've been friends.
Yeah,
We're on different sides of fences and in different things in life, but at the end of the day, we're still friends. We
right.
don't let that stuff come between us. But I got to tell you, back to you were there when I did the Fast Five at the NSA, where I talked about the hula hoop theory.
Yeah,
And it's like back to your conversation, you said when you apologized and said, "I'm sorry I made you feel that way." That sort of
yeah,
hit a chord with me. Is like I would probably step back and look at it and say, "I'm sorry I put you in the position where you felt you had to feel that way, but I'm not
mhm,
responsible for other people's feelings."
yeah,
And they're not responsible for mine. They can't make me feel any way. And like I said then, they can't make me do anything. If they try, it's probably going to hurt them.
yeah,
Um, but I try and be cognizant of that too when things go on in my life. It's like the two questions I always ask myself about taking accountability is, why am
mm,
I doing this?
yeah,
Why did I say that? Why am I feeling this way? And then the real brutal truth is, what am I getting out of it?
yeah,
Because most of the time, if I'm really honest with myself, I'm getting something. It may
mm,
be attention, it may be negative attention. You never know. Like when I was a kid, doing some acting out and getting negative attention. But that's the cool thing about this podcast. And I think I shared with you, I'm planning on launching this and dropping this podcast on December the 12th. It would have been my father's 85th birthday.
wow,
And, as kids, and, as you have children, so do I, we always want to do things to protect our kids and stuff. But sometimes when they get really out of sorts, you got to have some tough love with them too.
yeah,
And that's where my father held me accountable one time when he told me, he said, "You got yourself in this mess." He said, "You got to get yourself out of it." And he
yeah,
was done. He was done. And I was like, wow. And then I started looking at the things about, because he told me then, he said, "You got an anger problem." And at that
mm,
time, I had to own that. And I did. I was mad at the world, man, as a 15-year-old. And it wasn't benefiting me. So with some therapy and stuff, like you mentioned earlier, it's like sometimes we got to get out of our own head, because I realized years ago when I'm talking to myself, sometimes I'm talking to a sick puppy, man. So I can't do that. I
mhm,
got to talk to somebody else. They say, "No, not that path, this one over here." you know
right,
get on the right, get in the right lane here, dude. You're going down the wrong lane. So, but that's the key thing to me is, and it doesn't matter to me when people look at accountability, they sometimes they think it's the big things. It's
mm,
the big, put your shopping cart back at Costco.
yeah,
It's not their fault. It's not their responsibility to put your shopping cart away. Don't leave them scattered all over the parking lot. You
yeah,
know, don't block doors when you know somebody's going to have to get in there later. Don't, leave and pick up your trash.
yeah,
Certain small things, because I look at it, if you can't be responsible and accountable for the small things,
right,
how in the world are you going to handle the big things in life? You know, and that's where even at the NSA meeting that day, I asked permission to have a straightforward and honest conversation. And I told them then, I said, it may make you uncomfortable, but
yeah,
uncomfortable is good. And I know when I said, do you consider yourself a responsible person? And everybody's like, yeah. And then when I got to the part, I said, do you put your shopping cart back? I heard a couple of groans in the room. I'm like,
Mm,
you're saying something that may not be true.
yeah.
You know, and it's, to me, it's holding myself accountable in every moment of the day, whether it's, cutting somebody off in traffic or, working to not do that, being polite out there. It's the accountability, and it's my fault encompasses so many things in my day-to-day life. And, and if I think it's not my fault, I'll just call you and you'll say, no, it's your fault.
Yeah. But to hit that, Jeff, I mean, I think the two things that really stood out to me, what you shared, is one is that yes, it's looking at those aspects of our lives, because people are like, well, I don't do the shopping, because I Instacart or I do this, right? But there's always these areas for us. One of the big areas where even after I go finish this podcast, I'm going to the gym, and one of the things that it's big for me is re-racking your weights. All right,
Oh, yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
taking off the weights, right, and cleaning off machine after you're done with it, because somebody's going to use it afterwards. So that's the
Absolutely.
one. It's just like we can find these areas in all aspects of our lives. But the second thing is, well, actually, three things. The second thing is, what do you do in the moment where it wasn't your quote unquote responsibility, it's somebody else's trash? Do you choose to pick it up? Right.
I do.
And that's another area, not you specifically, but that's
Yeah.
one area I've been leaning into, of if I have the time, if I have the ability to lean in, like I can't re-rack all the weights, right? I just, but I do know that if I'm, if I have a moment, right, or I see something, I'll take it off, or I'll try to organize the weights in ways that I would want to see it, because that's the way I'd love to see it. And the last piece that I think is helpful for all of us is we all make mistakes. We all mess up. We all have moments where we
Absolutely.
blame other people, right? And one of our statements that is part of what we focus on is that when you're blaming, you're not building.
That's true.
And when I'm blaming somebody else, I'm not building either myself. I'm not building them up. I'm not building society up. And so I have to just admit that, hey, like I was off there. I didn't take responsibility. I didn't take accountability. And what am I going to do to rectify the situation? Whether I can absolutely rectify it with them, or if I can absolutely rectify it in the future. And
Yep.
so I think those are just great opportunities for us to think, because all of us have had those moments where we have shirked the it's all we've taken. This is one of your shirts. You should do it's all their fault, and then do a cross out of there and put my.
Oh, there you go. That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. It's funny
Right.
you made it. You said that about we all make mistakes, and it's just true. And sometimes we have to show ourselves grace like we do
Yeah.
other people.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, I think there's a huge number out there. They continually say they made a mistake. I said, well, the first time's a mistake. The
Mm,
second time is a choice.
yeah.
And that's where you have to look at the accountability and it being your fault. If you can't continue making mistakes.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, that's a choice. And then you got to wonder what am I getting out of this? Because I keep
Yeah.
doing the same behavior,
Yeah.
and that's not cool. So, but no, I need to send you a copy of my friend's book, gentleman named Dr. Darren Martin. He's got just a small, quick read book called The Sink.
Mm,
He went into a restroom one time, and as he was getting done and went to wash up, there was a guy sitting there wiping down the countertop. And he asked him, he said, well, do you work here? He said, no. He said, I just like to leave things better than the way I found them. So Darren wound up writing a book called The Sink. And he's
mm,
exactly right. And I've gotten in the habit of doing the same thing, just leave it a little better than we found it. That's some
yeah.
of our acts of kindness back to the world. Now,
Yeah.
yeah, if you re-racked all the weights, you would
I
never get a
wouldn't.
workout in, dude. It wouldn't happen. You can't do that. But
Yeah.
when it's in your path, yeah,
Yeah.
take care of it.
Yeah.
If it's something in the parking lot, I can pick it up and throw it away when I get home.
Mhm.
And but if it's your place of employment, that's your house. That's like
Yeah.
it'd be like me leaving stuff on the floor here in my house. It wouldn't last very long before somebody said something. It wouldn't be me, you
Right.
know. So being able to be responsible and accountability just takes in so many different forms in our life. So it's huge.
Yeah.
And I know you're living it and walking it every day, especially when I saw your post about the employee. I said, "Yep, he gets it now. Now he's living, he's walking it, talking it and walking it in his own life.
Yeah.
Not just it hit home with you. I could tell in your post, and when you and I had a conversation about it, it hit home pretty hard, and
Yeah.
it's true. Yeah.
We need to share that more. I think that's one of the things that I've tried to do more of, is sharing more of my failures, my faults, just because I think, social media and other places of media can give the perception. That's why I love you doing your podcast, is because it almost can make the perception like we're perfect, like we never get anything
Oh
wrong,
no,
like
no,
because
no,
it's
no.
promotional, right? And
Thank
it's like,
you.
you very rarely see, actually, this is an interesting thing. You very rarely see outtakes in promotional videos for movies, if
Oh,
ever,
really?
right? Because they're not going to show you where they messed up. They want to show you the best parts of the movie, and
Oh,
we're
yeah.
living a life like promotional videos rather than
Isn't
the
it true?
outtakes.
Yeah. And I learned a very, very long time ago. I am not all that in a bag of chips and a bowl of grits. It just ain't happening.
I don't eat
So
either, but
do what?
I don't eat either, but that's okay.
I don't eat chips anymore. I started eating healthier a while back, but yeah, there's the accountability too. I'm accountable for my own health.
Yeah,
Not the stuff that they want to feed me. They would love the promotional videos, as you call
yeah,
them. Yeah, I'm not eating all that. But being able to look at that and people need to have some self-deprecating humor too, because
mm,
you can't take it. I tell people all the time, don't take yourself too seriously. You're not getting out of here alive. Be kind to people, have fun with people, and you never know where the next relationship may come from.
yeah,
I had no idea when I went into that breakout session at the influence conference that you and I were going to strike into a pretty good friendship here, and see each other multiple times since then.
yeah,
It's awesome. Because you never know what path that your life is going to take. And I tell people a lot. Sometimes when we look at life and it's all jumbled up and messed up, and we don't understand it, we're looking at the backside of a cross stitch.
yeah.
Our creator's looking at the other side. He knows what the final vision is supposed to look like, and we just need to trust in his vision. So that's the
Mm,
way I go through life, because I don't try and understand some things. And then my favorite saying years ago, became my favorite saying. When I look at it, back to the hula hoop, I can only control what's inside. I can
yeah,
say, not my monkeys, not my circus. You know.
mm, yeah,
So
man.
let that go, man.
That's
So
good, man. I think, to your point, one thing, 'cause I always love kind of giving people, practical way to lean into these types of conversations, or like what can they do. And so one of the things that we started digging into the research when we were figuring out, like, all right, how do people lean into more respectful disagreements? And I think this really applies to accepting responsibility, accountability, and it's all my fault, is a research term called Iliism.
mm,
And because we started talking about three cells, because I always ask the question, what stops people from doing it? Right? Because it's easy for us just to say, all right, you should do more of X, but without really understanding, why don't people do more of X? And I believe one of the reasons that people aren't as accountable as they could be, including myself, aren't as responsible as they could be, is ego and pride.
oh
And,
yeah.
so one of the things, we talked, we have this three system, we call it, superior self, inferior self, and equal self. And when we're operating from superior self, it's like this place of ego, pride, I'm better than, so I don't need to. And this term Iliism this research based term Iliism can help us. And all Iliism is simply this: it's where you speak to yourself in third person. And so, an example, if I would say, what would equal self Justin do? Now, what they found that this does, and I found it too in practicing it, is that it provides just enough emotional regulation So when you're in the moment, when your amygdala has been hijacked and you don't want to take responsibility or take accountability, and then everything is moving away from it, asking what would equal self you do allows you that space to actually give yourself the type of advice you would give to a friend or a family member. And in doing that, it allows kind of like the amygdala that's hijacked to calm down. It allows, all the neuroscience things that are happening in our brains to actually subside just a bit for more logical solutions. And so
Right.
that's one thing that people can lean into when they're in those moments. You don't have to say it out loud, but just in your brain, asking the question, what would equal self me do? And then answer the question. And so I've been in these types of situations where I wasn't taking responsibility, I wasn't taking accountability, and I asked, "What do we equal self Justin do?" And I said, "Equal self Justin would listen more. Equal self Justin would ask more questions, and equal self Justin would apologize." And so I leaned into those things. I recently had a similar thing happen with my kids, where I realized I didn't give my daughter an opportunity to share deeply. And it's actually, I'll give you the situation. She had gotten these cookies that had been given to them. It's really special protein cookies that one of my friends makes. And she left them at the house, and she was gone to her mother's for a week. And when she leaves stuff, she often just forgets about them. And so I proceeded to give them away. And my wife, when my daughter came back, she was like, "Hey, where are my cookies?" And I was like, I gave them away. And she was very hurt by it. And I was like, "Oh, what are you hurt by? Like, you leave stuff all the time. You leave your lip gloss here, and I've just learned when you leave stuff, and I've told you before that when you leave it, I'm gonna either throw it away or I'm gonna give it away, right? Because it just becomes junk around the house." And she was going on and on, and I realized that I was now defending myself versus this was a specific situation, right? It was her book release. She had gotten this special gift, and even though I've made
Oh,
this comment that I literally I could have reached out to her and say, "Hey, Lydia, you got this gift." Da, da, da. And so when I came back after initially defending myself and putting the blame on her, a couple days later, I came back and I was like, I started saying to myself, like, "Well, equal self Justin do," and I apologized. And I said, "Hey, Lydia, I want to apologize to you because I realized that while true that I've made the statement that I give it away or throw it away if you leave it behind for the week when you're gone, that this was a specific and special situation, that this
yeah.
was tied to your book release, that this was a gift that someone gave you for that. And so I want to apologize for that. While that doesn't dismiss your responsibility, I want to take ownership of what I could have done differently. And I ended up reaching out to the person and getting two more new cookies to give to her because I realized that in that moment it's all my fault, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I want to be very clear, right? Because I think it's helpful people to get this that distinction that I love that my therapist gave me of, and I believe this is how you mean it, of it's all my fault means to me, I'm taking full responsibility. Not all responsibility, because it's not always and very rarely all our responsibility. But full responsibility is your hula hoop, message.
Absolutely.
Is that I'm taking full responsibility for what I could control. And
Absolutely.
that's what was all my fault.
Absolutely. That's a great takeaway for everybody. And you exercised in that regard what I learned a long time ago too, when you're doing some self-evaluation all the time, because I'm constantly evaluating what I say, what I do, and how I act. And when I'm wrong, promptly admit it.
Yeah.
You talking about helping build relationships with people. When you go back to them to apologize for stuff that you did, and you
Yeah.
take that accountability and that ownership, it builds a very unique bond with them. Then, because people say, "Oh, it makes me look inferior." No, in actuality, it heightens the respect level with that other person because you took ownership and you showed some vulnerability in the thing. But not only did you take ownership and apologize, you made it right. You went and got her some new cookies. So that's taking it one step further, which is huge.
Yeah.
Justin, thank you so much for your time today, dude. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this and just excited the fact that you were my first guest. I have put this off until you and I could do this. So because it was based on our conversation, I think in Colorado a year ago
Yeah.
at Influence, where I started talking about this, and it's my fault. I think it was the term that you coined when I said about accountability.
Yeah.
So, in signing off today, though, I want to let people realize and tell you that. So, what's the one thing as you take away from this conversation I had with Justin today? What's the one thing that you can take ownership of and that you can own going forward after today? Blame is easy. Taking ownership, that's where the magic starts. Thank you very much for everybody for being here. Justin, I'll see you later, brother, and tell Miss Tanya we said hi.
I will. All right, brother.
All right. Thanks, man. Bye.